"I will break you in bed," whispered the millionaire. But wedding night, she broke his heart instead. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The city lights shimmered across the Hudson River like scattered stars. Inside the rooftop restaurant, every table glowed under candlelight, violins hummed in the background, and the scent of truffle pasta drifted through the air. At the corner window sat Ethan Cross, a 32-year-old tech millionaire known for building empires and breaking hearts with equal precision. His tailored black suit fit like it was engineered, his expression unreadable as he watched the rain streak down the glass. Across from him sat Maya Layton, a freelance designer clutching her sketchbook like a shield. The night had started with curiosity, maybe even a little hope, but now it pulsed with confusion. She had come here expecting a meeting about a creative project for Cross Innovations, not a proposition that sounded dangerously close to a dare. Ethan leaned back, voice calm but cold. "Marry me," he said. "Think of it as a contract, not a romance." Maya blinked, certain she had misheard. "I am sorry. What did you just say?" His gaze did not waver. "A marriage contract. 6 months. Public appearances, charity galas, business dinners. You will help me silence the rumors about my company, and I will fund your design studio." Her pulse stumbled. "You are serious?" "Deadly," he replied. Then his lips curved slightly, not into a smile but something sharper. He leaned closer, his voice low enough to melt into the rain outside. "I will break you in bed, if you break the rules first." The words hung between them, heavy and deliberate. For a second, the hum of the restaurant seemed to fade. Maya's eyes flicked to the people around them, laughing over champagne, unaware of the strange negotiation taking place just a few tables away. She exhaled slowly. "You could have just said you wanted a business partner." "I have enough partners," Ethan said. "What I need is someone the world believes and someone who looks real beside me." "And what do I get for playing your wife?" He tilted his head slightly. "Freedom. You get to build what you have always wanted, without begging investors or chasing deadlines. You get the life your talent deserves." Maya studied him. There was power in his tone, but also something lonely behind the perfection of his posture. Maybe he did not realize how hollow his words sounded. Maybe he did. Her hand tightened around her sketchbook. "A marriage built on terms and conditions," she murmured. "How romantic." He shrugged. "Romance is optional. Results are not." Outside, thunder rolled over the river, and the reflections of city lights danced across their faces like shifting truths. Maya's throat felt dry, but she forced a small, defiant smile. "Fine," she said softly. "But if you think you can break me, Ethan Cross, you are in for a surprise." Cloak. He looked at her for a long moment, the faintest hint of amusement touching his lips. "Good," he said finally. "I prefer challenges." As the waiter approached with 2 glasses of wine, the air between them thickened an unspoken contract already written in the silence. Somewhere below, the rain fell harder, washing the city clean. But at that table by the window, 2 strangers had just agreed to a storm neither of them could control. The next morning, the storm had cleared, but the city still smelled of rain. Maya stood by her apartment window, staring at the gray light crawling through the blinds. The events of the night before played over and over in her mind like a scene she could not escape. Ethan Cross, tech genius, billionaire, and every headline's favorite enigma had asked her to marry him for business. It should have been absurd. It still was. Yet his words lingered like static in her chest. Her phone buzzed. A message from a private number. "Contract ready for review. Meeting at Cross Tower, 10 amperes, M." She stared at it, then at the sketches scattered across her table, dreams drawn in pencil, now soaked in irony. She needed the money. Her mother's medical bills were 3 months overdue, her studio rent unpaid. Integrity was priceless, but survival had a number. At Cross Tower, the lobby gleamed with marble and glass. Employees walked fast, confident, all dressed in black and gray. Maya felt like a smudge of color in a grayscale world. When the elevator doors opened to the top floor, Ethan was already waiting, looking like he had not slept yet, somehow untouched by exhaustion. He gestured to the papers spread across the table. "Here are the terms." She took a seat. Her fingers brushed the cool surface of the contract. "No love, no expectations. Appear together when required. Maintain confidentiality. 6 months duration. Compensation. Full funding for your design studio. Her throat tightened. You really do not believe in love, do you? Ethan's tone was flat. I believe in systems that work. Then what happens after 6 months? He glanced up. We end it. Clean. No complications. The lawyer beside him cleared his throat politely. If both parties agree, of course. Maya looked down again. Her name in neat black ink felt heavier than it should. She could walk away. She should. But when she thought of her mother lying in that hospital bed, the choice was already made. She signed. Ethan's voice softened, almost approving. Welcome to the deal, Mrs. Cross. Her head lifted sharply. Do not call me that. He almost smiled. Habit. You will get used to it. Later that afternoon, she moved into the penthouse. The elevator opened to a wall of glass overlooking the Hudson River. Everything was pristine polished marble, chrome fixtures, art that looked like it belonged in a museum. Yet the air felt cold, too still, like beauty without warmth. Her suitcase looked ridiculous in the middle of all that perfection. One small bag of clothes, a sketchbook, and a worn box of pencils. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, the view dizzying. For the first time, she realized what kind of world she had stepped into, one where people spoke in numbers and promises expired faster than champagne bubbles. That evening, the housekeeper served dinner in the formal dining room. The table could seat 20, but only 2 chairs were occupied. Maya sat across from Ethan, trying not to stare at how effortless he looked. No tie, sleeves rolled, a glass of red wine in his hand. You do not talk much, she said after a moment. I talk when it matters. Does it matter now? He looked up. Maybe. They ate mostly in silence. The clinking of silverware filled the space between them. When she reached for the salt, their hands brushed. The contact was brief, but charged. Like an electric current neither wanted to acknowledge. After dinner, he stood and adjusted his cuffs. Tomorrow we meet with the foundation board. You will wear the silver dress my assistant left in your room. Maya frowned. Do you always command people like chess pieces? He met her gaze, calm but unyielding. Only when I cannot afford to lose. When he walked away, she remained seated, staring at the untouched dessert. Outside the windows, the city pulsed with light, but inside the penthouse, it felt like another planet, beautiful, silent, and lonely. Later, in her new bedroom, she unpacked the sketchbook and flipped it open. The first drawing was of a bridge from her childhood hometown, the place she used to go when life felt heavy. She traced the lines with her fingertips and whispered to herself, do not lose who you are in his world. But when she closed her eyes, it was his voice she heard again, smooth, steady, dangerous. I will break you in bed, if you break the rules first. Maya pressed the book to her chest and exhaled. For the first time, she was not sure if she feared him, pitied him, or something far more complicated. Outside, thunder rolled again over the river, though the sky was clear. It was not a storm of weather anymore. It was something else. Something she had just walked straight into. The morning sun spilled through the penthouse windows, catching on the silver edges of the skyline. Maya stood in front of the mirror, the silver dress Ethan's assistant had chosen shimmering softly under the light. It fit perfectly, maybe too perfectly, like it had been measured for a woman who was not her. She adjusted the neckline, her reflection a stranger wrapped in someone else's success. Downstairs, Ethan waited beside the grand piano, phone in hand, already speaking in a voice that carried quiet authority. When he noticed her, he ended the call without a word. His eyes moved over her, not in desire but in evaluation, like an architect inspecting a structure he had designed. You clean up well, he said. She raised an eyebrow. And you give compliments like performance reviews. For a second, his lips curved, almost a smile. Ready for your first appearance as Mrs. Cross? Ready enough, she replied. The car ride to the foundation's office was silent except for the hum of the engine. Outside the tinted windows, the city flowed past glass towers, billboards, and the restless pulse of people chasing something they could not name. Maya watched it all, wondering if she was one of them now. When they arrived, photographers were already waiting. Ethan stepped out first, tall and composed, his expression unreadable. Then he offered her his hand. For a moment, she hesitated. But the flash of cameras reminded her why she was here. She took his hand, and together they walked through the doors like a couple carved from confidence and calculation. Inside, the board meeting began. Maya sat beside him, pretending to understand the language of stocks and projections. But when a question came from a gray-haired man across the table, Mr. Cross, How do we know this marriage is not another publicity stunt? The room went still. Ethan did not flinch. Because I do not make decisions for show, he said evenly. Then, to Maya's surprise, he turned slightly toward her. And because she is the only person in the room who tells me the truth, whether I like it or not. Maya blinked. She had no idea why he said it, but for a heartbeat, the tension broke. A few smiles flickered around the table. The meeting continued, smoother than before. When it ended, Ethan walked beside her down the marble hallway. You handled that well, he said. I did not do anything. You stayed. Most people run when things get uncomfortable. She looked at him. You must be surrounded by cowards then. He did not answer, but his silence was not angry. It was thoughtful. That evening they attended a dinner with investors at a riverside restaurant. The setting sun painted the water gold, and laughter filled the air. Maya spoke little, observing the polished world Ethan lived in, wineglasses glinting, polished manners hiding sharpened motives. During dessert, a woman with red lipstick leaned close to Ethan. You finally brought someone, Ethan. She is lovely. He smiled politely. Yes, I got lucky. The woman's smile was sharp. I am sure luck had nothing to do with it. Maya felt the sting in the words but kept her composure. Later, outside by the river, she leaned against the railing, breathing in the cool evening air. You handled that better than I expected, Ethan said, joining her. She gave a small laugh. You mean I did not throw my drink at her? I mean you did not let her win. For the first time his tone was softer. The city lights reflected in his eyes, dimming the edges of his usual control. They stood in silence for a while, the hum of traffic below and the slow rhythm of the river beside them. Why do you do it? Maya asked finally. Build empires, chase numbers, live behind glass? Ethan's gaze stayed on the water. Because if I stop, it all falls apart. That sounds exhausting. It is survival, he said simply. Maya turned toward him, her voice low. You know, survival and living are not the same thing. Go. He looked at her then, really looked, as if seeing her beyond the silver dress and the pretense of their arrangement. Something flickered in his eyes, something he quickly buried under composure. We should go, he said, turning away. In the car back to the penthouse, neither spoke, but the silence between them had changed. It was no longer just empty space. It was charged, restless, alive. That night, when Maya returned to her room, she found a single sketch left on her desk. It was hers, an old drawing she had left in her portfolio, but someone had reframed it. A note rested beside it, in Ethan's precise handwriting. Every empire starts with a design. Do not stop drawing. She traced the words with her fingers. It was not an apology, not affection, but something in between. She smiled faintly, whispering to herself, maybe the system still works, just not the way he thinks. Quote, outside, the city glowed against the dark river, and somewhere in the apartment above, Ethan Cross stood by his window, staring at the same skyline, wondering why, for the first time in years, work could not drown out the sound of her voice. A few weeks passed, and Maya began to understand the strange rhythm of Ethan's world. Days were filled with meetings, interviews, and appearances. Nights were quiet, mechanical, and lonely. The marriage contract was like an invisible wall keeping them close enough to be convincing, but never close enough to be real. Every morning, Ethan left before sunrise, his routine sharp and precise. Maya stayed behind, sketching by the window with coffee that always turned cold. At first the silence felt heavy, but as time went on, she began to see patterns in the calm, the way the light moved across the room, the hum of the city below, the echo of her own thoughts growing louder. One evening, Ethan returned early, surprising her. His tie was loose, his sleeves rolled up, his expression unreadable. You are working again, he said, glancing at her sketches scattered across the coffee table. Trying to? She replied, without looking up. He picked up one of the drawings, a concept for a modern art exhibit titled The Design of Trust. The lines were bold, the message simple, connection built from chaos. This is new, he said quietly. It is something I want to build one day, a space where people can see what honesty looks like. Ethan studied it for a moment, then set it down gently. You think honesty can be designed? Maya looked up, meeting his eyes. I think everything else already is. He almost smiled, but the sound of his phone cut the air. His tone changed instantly, businesslike again. Yes, move the shares before the announcement. I do not want surprises tomorrow. He ended the call, then saw her expression. It is work. I know, she said softly. It always is. The next day, they attended another gala, this time at a mountain resort owned by one of his partners. The evening air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and champagne. Inside, the ballroom shimmered with golden light, a sea of silk dresses and polished shoes. As they entered, all eyes turned toward them. Ethan's hand rested lightly on her back, a gesture of habit more than affection. Cameras flashed. Smiles followed. The performance began again. Midway through dinner, a journalist approached, microphone in hand. "Mr. Cross, one question. People say your marriage is just a cover for business. What would you say to that?" Ethan's jaw tightened, but before he could answer, Maya leaned toward the microphone. Her voice was calm, but her words carried weight. "I would say people love stories that are easy to label," she said. "But some things do not fit into headlines. We are two people figuring out how to build something that lasts whatever name the world gives it." The room went silent for a moment, then applause rippled across the tables. Ethan looked at her, caught between surprise and pride. After the event, they slipped outside to the terrace overlooking the mountains. The sky was dark velvet, dotted with stars. Below them, the lights of the resort flickered like fireflies. "You handled that better than I could have," he said quietly. "You mean without turning it into a press statement?" He chuckled, low and genuine this time. "Something like that." They stood side by side, the cold air brushing between them. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Maya asked softly, "Do you ever stop pretending, Ethan? Even when no one is watching?" He looked out at the horizon. "Pretending keeps everything from falling apart." She turned toward him, her voice steady. "Maybe it is the pretending that is breaking you." Quote. He met her gaze, and for a heartbeat, all the walls around him seemed to tremble. His voice was lower when he finally spoke. "Careful, Maya. You are starting to sound like someone who cares." "Maybe I do," she said. The air thickened. Something unspoken passed between them, fragile, real, terrifying. Then a gust of wind swept across the terrace, pulling her hair loose. Without thinking, Ethan reached out, tucking a strand behind her ear. His hand lingered for a second, longer than it should have. "You should get inside," he murmured. She smiled faintly. "You always retreat when things get human." He hesitated, then stepped back. "And you always push when things get dangerous." The ride back to the hotel was quiet again, but the silence was different now, tender and electric all at once. Later, in her room, Maya could still feel the warmth of his hand. She tried to focus on her sketches, but every line she drew seemed to curve into his silhouette. Somewhere across the hall, she knew he was awake too, probably standing by the window again, fighting a war he would never admit existed. For the first time, she wondered what would happen if this contract stopped being pretend. Downstairs, the wind picked up, whistling through the pine trees outside the resort. It sounded almost like a warning, or maybe a promise. And in that quiet, something invisible shifted between them, a truth waiting for the courage to be spoken. The morning after the gala came quietly, with sunlight spilling through the sheer curtains of the mountain resort. Maya woke to the sound of birds outside and the faint echo of laughter from the lobby below. She sat up, still half lost in the memory of the night before the stars. The touch of his hand, the look in his eyes that felt almost human. Almost. When she stepped out onto the balcony, the view stretched endlessly. Mist hung low over the peaks, and the air smelled of pine and wet earth. Ethan was already there, leaning on the railing, a cup of black coffee in his hand. His suit jacket was gone, his sleeves rolled up, his hair slightly disheveled in the wind. For once, he looked like a man, not a brand. "Could not sleep either?" she asked softly. He glanced at her, then back at the horizon. "Sleep is overrated." Quote. "Or maybe you are afraid of it," she said, teasing but gentle. He turned, one eyebrow raised. "Afraid of sleep? Afraid of what catches up to you when things get quiet." A faint smile tugged at his lips. "You think you have me figured out, Mrs. Cross?" "Not even close," she said. "But I know loneliness when I see it." For a moment he said nothing. The wind brushed through the silence between them. Then he spoke, his voice low. "When I was 24, I built my first company in a basement. I slept on the floor, ate canned food, and worked until my hands shook. I thought success would fix everything. But every year, I just built taller walls around myself." Maya watched him, the man behind the empire beginning to show through the cracks. "Walls keep people out," she said, "but they also keep you trapped." He looked at her then, eyes darker than before. "And what if I do not know how to live without them?" She smiled sadly. "Then maybe it is time to learn." They stood there for a long while, neither speaking, both lost in the fragile peace of the morning. Later that afternoon, Ethan invited her to join him on a short drive before heading back to the city. The The road wound down through the forest, sunlight flickering through the trees. They stopped at a small overlook by a river where the water rushed over smooth stones. It was quiet, except for the rhythm of the current and the wind in the leaves. "This is where I used to come," he said, when I still remembered what silence felt like. Maya picked up a flat stone and skipped it across the water. "You remember now." He looked at her, and for the first time, there was no trace of calculation in his face, just a man caught in a moment he did not want to end. That night, back at the penthouse, the city lights glowed like embers across the Hudson River. Ethan poured himself a drink, while Maya sat near the piano, sketching quietly. The sound of the pen on paper filled the space between them. After a while, he spoke. "You once said honesty could be designed. How do you design something you cannot control?" She looked up, "By letting it happen anyway." He set down the glass. "You make it sound easy." "It is not," she said, "but it is real." Their eyes met, and the air changed. No pretense, no audience, no contract, only truth. The distance between them felt smaller than ever, and when he took a step closer, she did not move away. "Maya," he said quietly, "you are breaking all the rules." She smiled. "Then maybe it is time you broke one too." He hesitated, then brushed his thumb against her cheek. It was a touch so soft it felt like a confession. For a heartbeat, the world outside disappeared, the city, the contracts, the expectations. There was only them, suspended between fear and something that felt dangerously close to love. But before either could speak, his phone rang, shattering the moment. He stepped back, the wall rebuilding itself in seconds. "I need to take this," he said, his voice already different. Maya turned away, forcing herself to breathe. She knew better than to expect more, yet something inside her ached at how easily he retreated. He finished the call, but the silence afterward was heavier than before. "I am sorry," he said, though his tone sounded like habit. She nodded, not trusting herself to answer. "Good night, Ethan." When she reached her room, she closed the door and pressed her back against it. For the first time, the penthouse felt colder than ever. She wanted to hate him, but she could not. Because behind every guarded word, she had seen the truth. He was afraid of love the same way others feared loss. Across the hall, Ethan stood alone by the window, watching the rain return to the city. He thought of her laughter by the river, her voice calling him out like no one ever had. And he realized something he could not admit aloud. The walls he built to protect himself were starting to crack. Outside, thunder rolled again over the Hudson. Inside, two hearts stood on opposite sides of a contract, pretending not to tremble for the same reason. Days turned into weeks, and something unspoken began to shift between them. The boundaries of the contract blurred like ink running in the rain. Ethan and Maya still kept their distance in public, but the silences grew softer, the glances longer, and the air between them heavier with everything they refused to say. Maya found herself noticing things she never had before, the way he always checked the locks twice before leaving, the faint scar on his wrist that he never talked about, the quiet exhaustion that hid behind his confidence. Ethan, in turn, noticed her laughter when she thought he was not listening, the way her hands moved when she drew, the warmth she brought into rooms that had always felt cold. One Friday evening, the company hosted a charity dinner at a riverside hotel. Ethan and Maya arrived hand in hand for the cameras, a perfect picture of luxury and poise. Inside, chandeliers glowed like captured stars, and the hum of polite conversation filled the hall. Throughout the night, Ethan watched her move through the crowd, elegant, graceful, genuine. She talked to guests with ease, listening more than she spoke, her kindness disarming even the most skeptical donors. It struck him how naturally she belonged in a world that had always felt false to him. When the speeches ended, the lights dimmed and soft jazz filled the room. Couples drifted onto the dance floor. Ethan hesitated, then extended his hand. "Would you like to dance?" Maya looked surprised but smiled. "I thought you did not dance." "I do not," he admitted, "but I can learn." She placed her hand in his. His touch was firm, careful, as if he were afraid to break something fragile. They moved slowly, swaying to the rhythm of the music. At first, it was awkward, two people too aware of themselves, but then something changed. The space between them closed. Her head rested lightly against his shoulder, and for the first time he let himself breathe. "You are full of surprises," she murmured. "So are you," he said quietly. "You have been rewriting the rules since the day we met." She looked up, meeting his eyes. Maybe they needed rewriting. He almost laughed. "You might be right. Wait." When the song ended, they lingered in silence before stepping apart. The cameras flashed again, breaking whatever peace they had found. Ethan guided her back to the table, but his mind was elsewhere. Later that night, after the guests had gone, Ethan drove them home through the quiet streets. The city lights reflected off the river, gold streaks on black water. He parked outside the penthouse and turned off the engine, but neither moved. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For letting your walls down tonight, even if it was only for one song." He smiled faintly. "You are giving me too much credit." "No," she said. "You are giving yourself too little." He looked at her for a long moment, the sound of the rain tapping against the windshield. "Maya," he said finally, "you make me forget why I built those walls in the first place." Her heart stuttered. "Then maybe it is time to stop rebuilding them." The air grew still. He leaned forward slightly, close enough to feel her breath, but then he stopped. His eyes flicked away, the hesitation sharp as glass. "I cannot," he whispered. She swallowed the ache rising in her chest. "Then you will never be free." Without another word, she opened the door and stepped out into the rain. Ethan watched as she disappeared into the lobby, her silver dress catching the light before the doors closed behind her. He stayed there for a long time, alone in the car, until the rain blurred the world outside. Upstairs, Maya changed into her pajamas and sat by the window, sketchbook in her lap. The page she had started earlier was now covered in messy lines, half a portrait, half a confession. She tried to draw his face but could not finish the eyes. They were too complicated, too full of things she could not name. Across the hall, Ethan poured himself another drink and stood by the glass wall, watching the river flash with lightning. He remembered the way she had looked at him on the dance floor without fear, without pretense. It terrified him, because for the first time, someone had seen through him and stayed. He closed his eyes, hearing her voice again. "Then you will never be free." Somewhere between guilt and longing, he realized she was right. The empire he had built could survive anything except the truth he was starting to feel. The next morning, when Maya came down for breakfast, the dining table was empty, but a note lay beside her cup. "Meeting in Chicago. Back tomorrow. Do not wait up. E." She stared at the handwriting, neat and emotionless, and exhaled. She knew what it meant. Another retreat. Another wall. But this time, she did not feel defeated. Instead, she whispered to herself, "You can run, Ethan Cross. But one day, the truth will catch you." Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, lighting up the river below. Inside, a storm was still gathering, quiet but unstoppable, the kind that could destroy everything or finally set it free. 2 days later, Ethan's name flooded every newsfeed. "Mystery marriage scandal at Cross Innovations," the headlines screamed. Someone had leaked photos of their contract pages stamped with signatures, conditions, and payment clauses. Within hours, every investor and journalist in the city was tearing the story apart. Maya saw it first, while sketching at the cafe near the park. The moment she scrolled down and saw her name printed in bold beside his, her stomach dropped. "Confidential marital agreement revealed." The words burned into her screen. She could almost hear the world laughing. Her phone rang again and again, unknown numbers flashing across the display. She turned it off, grabbed her things, and walked home through the cold drizzle. When she reached the penthouse, the security guards were already gone. Reporters waited at the entrance, shouting questions. "Mrs. Cross, was it all for money? Are you part of a publicity stunt?" She pushed through the crowd, her heart pounding, but when she stepped into the apartment, it was empty. No Ethan, no note, just silence and the echo of betrayal. A message finally arrived that night from his assistant. "Mr. Cross is in a board meeting. He requests privacy until further notice." She stared at the words for a long moment. Privacy. That was all she had ever given him. And now, when the world was tearing her apart, he could not even give her the truth. The next morning, Maya went to the Cross Innovations headquarters herself. The receptionist froze when she saw her. "Mrs. Cross, I am sorry, but Mr. Cross is in a confidential meeting. Chloe. Tell him it is his wife," Maya said quietly. Minutes later, she was led into the conference room. The board members sat in a tense semicircle, voices low and sharp. Ethan stood at the head of the table, eyes cold, hands resting on the chair in front of him. When he saw her, surprise flickered, but only for a second. "This is not a good time, Maya." She stepped closer. "Not a good time? My face is everywhere, Ethan. They are calling me a fraud. They think I sold myself to you." Quote. He exhaled, keeping his tone measured. "The situation is being handled." "Handled?" she repeated. "You mean buried, like everything else that feels real to you." "Maya," he warned, glancing at the others in the room, "we can talk later." "No," she said, her voice steady but breaking inside. "We talk now, because if I walk out that door, I am not coming back." The room fell silent. Ethan's expression hardened, but behind it she saw something flicker: fear, regret, maybe both. "Do you think I wanted this to happen?" he said, his voice low. "Everything I built is collapsing." "And what about me?" she whispered. "I never asked for your money, Ethan. I only asked for honesty." He looked away. "This is not about feelings." "Yes," she said. "That is exactly why it is falling apart." For a moment, no one breathed. Then she turned and walked out, ignoring the cameras waiting outside. The flashbulbs burst like lightning, but she did not stop. Back at the park, she sat on the same bench where she used to draw before all of this began. Her reflection stared back at her from a puddle on the pavement, tired, hurt, but still standing. She opened her sketchbook, and on the first blank page, she wrote 3 words: "No more pretending." Somewhere across the city, in an office high above the skyline, Ethan Cross watched the same headlines replay on the screen. And for the first time in his life, he did not care about damage control or stock prices, because the only thing he had ever truly wanted was the one thing he had just driven away. A week passed. The scandal did not fade, it grew. Every magazine, every talk show, every blog dissected their lives as if they were characters in a play. Cross Innovations lost investors, and Maya lost her peace. Yet amid the noise, she stayed silent. She moved out of the penthouse, found a small studio near the river, and returned to the only thing that ever made sense: her art. Each morning she painted until her hands trembled. Each night she sat by the window, staring at the skyline where his tower glowed like a reminder of everything she had left behind. She told herself she was fine, that this was freedom. But freedom felt a lot like loneliness. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived. No return address, just her name written in Ethan's sharp handwriting. Her fingers hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single note. "You were right. I was wrong. Meet me tomorrow at the gallery on River Street, noon." She almost tore it apart, but something stopped her. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the small, stubborn hope that he had finally learned what she tried to teach him. The next day, she walked into the gallery expecting an apology. Instead, she froze. The space was filled with light and color, with her own paintings displayed on every wall work she thought no one had ever seen. The Design of Trust. The title glowed on a silver plaque. Ethan stood in the center, dressed simply for once. No tie, no pretense. When he saw her, his expression was soft but uncertain. "This is your show," he said quietly. "I bought every piece from the collectors who owned them. The world deserves to see what real honesty looks like." Maya's throat tightened. "Why would you do this?" "Because it was the only way I knew how to say I am sorry." She looked around the room. Every painting was a part of her story: the park bench, the river, the penthouse window, even the mountain view. All the moments that had built and broken her now surrounded them like witnesses. He took a hesitant step closer. "You told me once that walls keep people trapped. You were right. I built mine so high that I forgot what it felt like to see the world. But when you walked away, it all fell apart. You did not destroy me, Maya, you saved me from myself." Her eyes glistened. "You hurt me, Ethan. You made me believe in something only to use it as a shield." "I know," he said, "and I will spend the rest of my life proving that I can be more than that." For a long moment, they just stood there, surrounded by the echoes of their past. Then she spoke softly. "This is not about money or success anymore. If I stay, it is not because of what you can give me, it is because I choose you." Ethan nodded, emotion flickering across his face. "Then let me earn that choice." As the lights dimmed for the gallery's evening opening, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the same silver ring she had left behind. He placed it gently in her hand. "No contracts this time," he said, "only a promise." She looked down at the ring, then back at him. The storm that had once defined them was gone, replaced by something quiet, real, and human. For the first time she smiled, not for the cameras, not for survival, but for herself, and when she slipped the ring onto her finger again, it was not a symbol of a deal, but of a beginning. A year later, the city looked different. The skyline still glittered at night, but for Ethan and Maya, it no longer felt cold. The scandal had long faded, replaced by something more powerful than gossip redemption. The Design of Trust exhibition had turned into a permanent foundation that funded young artists and community projects. Every piece sold from that first show went toward supporting others who were once overlooked, just like Maya had been. And Ethan, once the CEO who lived behind glass walls, now spent his mornings walking through the foundation's open studio, talking to the people whose dreams he helped build. Maya worked beside him, her hands often streaked with paint, her laughter echoing through the same halls that once held silence. The world still called him a millionaire, but for the first time, Ethan no longer defined himself by that title. One late afternoon, they returned to the riverside park where everything had started the same bench, the same quiet hum of the city around them. The trees had begun to bloom again, scattering pale petals across the path. Maya sat down, sketchbook in her lap. "Do you ever think about how strange it all was?" she asked. "That one contract changed everything?" Ethan smiled, watching the river flow. "I used to think I was the one writing the rules. Turns out you rewrote them for me." Quote. She laughed softly. "Maybe we both needed a new draft." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the old contract, the one that had once defined them. He tore it in half, the sound sharp in the quiet air. "No more terms, no more conditions," he said. "Only truth." Maya's eyes softened. "You finally learned to stop building walls." He turned to her, his voice low but steady. "No, I just found someone worth letting in." Quote. For a while they sat in silence, watching the water catch the last gold of the sunset. The city lights began to flicker alive one by one. Then Ethan stood and held out his hand. "Come on, there is something I want to show you." They walked a few blocks to a newly renovated community hub. The front sign glowed softly in the twilight. The Cross-Layton Center for Art and Technology. Inside, volunteers were preparing for the evening workshop. On one wall hung a framed photograph from the gallery's first night, a picture of them standing together under the words "The Design of Trust." Maya touched the frame gently. "You kept this." "Of course," he said. "It is where everything began." She looked at him, smiling through tears. "You once said you would break me in bed." He laughed quietly. "And you broke my heart instead." She stepped closer, taking his hand. "Maybe that was the point. Sometimes you have to break something before you can rebuild it right." He nodded, and in that moment, there was no pretense, no contracts, no power struggles, just two people who had learned that love, at its truest, is not about control, but courage. As they stepped back outside, the night breeze carried the scent of rain over the river. Ethan looked at her and whispered, "You were the one thing I never saw coming." Maya smiled, leaning into him. "And you were the one thing I refused to run from." The camera of the world might still watch them, but this time, there was nothing left to hide. Because in the end, it was never about a millionaire's empire or a contract's promise. It was about two hearts that chose truth over fear and love over pride. And as the city lights shimmered behind them, their story finally found its peace.